What's up, Flick fans? Welcome back to the channel. It's almost February, so you know what that means. Today I'm talking all of the movies that I saw in the month of January. There's like 12 of them. Oh, 13. Good lord. No super huge, crazy, notable movie this month, but I will tell you, I saw quite a bit, and frankly, I was really disappointed. I mean, it's January, what do we expect? But disappointment abound. Also, we're trying a new style today, so drop a like if you enjoy this format. We may do it for more tier lists, but right now, I need to know what movie I missed, what movie was your favorite, and let's get into the first film, and that is Night Swim. Oh boy, not the best start to January. This was a rough one to get through. Yet there are stars in this film. Wyatt Russell specifically, I'm a big fan of his right now that I expected a lot out of, and the premise, it seems really cool. It seems like a great idea for a short film. Well, that's what they did. And from what everyone says, that short film was really enjoyable, but then the movie comes out and it's a bit, well, bad. Carrie Condon's in this movie. Carrie Condon just got nominated for an Oscar, and for some reason her rep said, yeah, here's a good one, Night Swim. But again, you hear this premise? It's really cool. There are some nice horror-y moments in here, but there is something going on in this pool. This new family moves into this house, and unfortunately, they have to deal with the consequences. It's like every cliche horror movie trope is in this one. No interesting characters, which kept me at arm's length of the movie the entire time. Why have I spent so much time on Night Swim? It's a bit of a debate as to whether it deserves to go on the bad or awful tier, but the more I think about it, the less I got out of it. Unfortunately, it's going on the awful tier.
I think it's just a superstition.
How about I.S.S? I saw this trailer and actually really liked it. Ariana DeBose is in this film. Chris Messina, who I couldn't figure out who that was on my live stream the other day, he's in this movie, but he was also in Air. Go watch Air instead. John Gallagher Jr., like everybody that I like has a role. It's just none of the characters are interesting whatsoever in this film. It is bland character development across the board, but what's happening story-wise is great. The world is being, from what it looks like, destroyed, and both of the parties on board this space station have to take control of it because you have the Russians versus the United States, and that becomes this internal conflict, but there's also a bit of a twist and spin on the premise that not a lot of people will see coming.
You didn't see that coming.
It tries its best not to be generic sci-fi, but as it progresses, while there are entertaining things happening here and there, a scene or two that will resonate, but for the most part, I've seen this movie before, and because of that, I.S.S. is going on the meh tier.
Can I get you a drink, Gabby?
Agent Gladwell,
Am I in trouble?
you and your friends.
Lift. Kevin Hart and crew. There's a heist. It's a bit of an Ocean's 11 situation. Or you could make the comparison to all of the movies on Netflix that have come out that are very similar to this premise from, what was the Rock and Ryan Reynolds movie? What was that? Red Notice? That's it. And then Six Underground. Another Ryan Reynolds movie. Sam Worthington, Vincent D'Onofrio, Gugu Mbatha-Raw, who's actually really good in this film. She's the only character that gets a lot or gets a solid arc. But you could have taken all of the actors, put them in completely different roles in this movie, and it would have been the same thing. It's like they didn't cast the character depending on who the actor is. They just cast the people that they wanted to and people that have been in Netflix projects before. And Kevin Hart, who is normally good, and I'm actually really excited to see how his career as a more serious actor continues to grow. But his character in here is just so boring. The heist itself, one or two scenes that are filmed in an interesting way, but nothing special. Nothing special about the plot, nothing special about the characters, other than Abby. And yeah, this is just such a forgettable Netflix movie. It's a bad movie. I'm going Lift on the bad tier, unfortunately.
Mr. Miller, I'm assuming that you got one of these before.
I read the whole list.
Well, there's 12 books on that list.
Party hard.
Martin Freeman, Jenna Ortega. This released in limited theaters. I got a chance to go check it out. Miller's Girl. It's about this obsessive relationship between a teacher and his student. I didn't really know what the relationship would be like before going into the film, and honestly, it kind of worried me because this type of thing is a little disgusting. So if you handle it the wrong way, it's going to be gross. If you handle it in the right way, it could make for an interesting film. And it didn't really handle it in the gross way, but it didn't capitalize on what could have been an interesting dynamic between these two really talented actors. Ortega is giving it her all. The monologues, the storytelling, if you will, the voiceover, all of that is great. And her obsession somewhat, but also the way she's being manipulated, and then the way she manipulates others towards the end of the film, that was interesting. She's a talented young writer. Martin Freeman's her teacher who enlists her on this project, and it kind of opens up her mind just a little bit, and there's this obsession present. And on the other side of things, you have this guy who, you can tell there's a little something going on there, but he tries his best to refrain from that. So on its surface, this could have made for a complex movie with complex relationships. Again, hopefully not going overboard. It never went that way, but it also never really became interesting for me. I'm watching this thinking there are so many opportunities to make this more interesting than it is, and these are characters that have a lot to them. There's a little bit of depth there. It's just never really explored. And as we progress, I'm thinking, how are they going to wrap this up? You give us all of this potential here just to not do anything at the end and just to leave us so dry and come on, man. That was such a bad ending to what was an intriguing premise, but also one that had to toe the fence in the right way. Miller's Girl ended up being a bad movie. It botched its opportunities. Good performances, but that's about it.
Good morning. It's the little kitchen.
The kitchen. If you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen or just don't watch this movie. This is all about London's last remaining housing estate called The Kitchen. People are in there not wanting to leave, and we're dealing with class and race and all sorts of interesting topics with this film. But every week or so, the police come in, they try to get people out of there, and everyone who is there just latches on to this play. I mean, there's so many somewhat real and emotional moments that you could get from this film, and the main relationship between our two characters, this guy and this younger kid who keeps getting caught up in really bad things, and he's trying not to go in the direction that this older gentleman didn't want him to go in, but that creates for a complex web of emotions and ideals and characteristics and some really good things in here. Where I found the film didn't quite meet the mark was the pacing, the potential that was never capitalized on, and the routes they go down all throughout, they just weren't really as interesting as the main emotional relationship between the two characters. Some really nice moments in there. The best part about this film is seeing Daniel Kaluuya as a director and the possibilities from that down the road. This is his first project. He will get better. That being said, I thought it was fine, and because I thought it was fine, I'm going to put it on the okay tier.
Most of you are aware that you live in a reality parallel to many versions of your universe. I've gathered you all to save your world.
Justice League, Crisis on Infinite Earths. I wanted to love this. I'm a big fan of the Flashpoint Paradox and some of these other DC animated films. This one for me had a couple of things that I found didn't quite work. The animation isn't as good as it normally is. The characters and the voices of those characters, they were actually pretty solid for the most part. Matt Bomer and Jensen Ackles was Batman here. He was fine. I wasn't really responding to the way these characters were handled, other than the Flash, who had a nice story here. He keeps going in and out of time and between realms and, appearing in places that he used to be or he is now, or something happening in another world. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty hectic what's going on there. But when the madness really starts to happen and this world-ending thing is going on, it's not really described very well. It's described much better in the comics. It just wasn't as engaging as I wanted it to be, and as other DC movies have been in the past. I think the biggest issue is the amount of exposition in the characters' dialogue and just things they would say that were so obvious and evident. Instead of showing us emotions, it's kind of telling us what they were feeling. I'm like, this is really bad writing, man. I go back to the Justice League, the animated series days, and that writing was really solid across the board. Maybe it's nostalgia talking, but this film, compared to some of the other films I've seen, the writing just wasn't there. So I wasn't all that engaged, even though I love the idea of this movie. I'm going meh tier for Crisis Part 1. Founders Day. There's this mayoral election happening in this town, and some weird things start to happen, and you've got a killer maybe, or something else is going on, but it's really just kind of focused on the teens and their relationships for the first 20 minutes, and I could have cared less about everything going on between these teenagers. My goodness, it was just... Oh! I was so bored at the beginning of this movie. I was so bored. It was so dumb. And it has that Purge type feeling to it, to where it's over the top and the characters are saying crazy things. But I'm like, man, you could have just given us somebody interesting to latch onto here. Something cool happen. I mean, some of the kills are cool, admittedly, and there is this style to this movie that it commits to, and I kind of appreciate it, but at the same time, it's really bad, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on Founders Day because it somehow managed to be worse than Night Swim. This was a terrifyingly bad experience in the theater, some nice moments to where it just kind of falls into its own traps, and I see why they didn't release this as wide as maybe they wanted to in the beginning. I'm putting Founders Day on the awful tier. Blah. It's just not good, folks.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
I'm Jason, 2J's Jennings. I was a football legend. But once you reach the mountaintop of greatness, everybody wants to see you fall.
I want to be really clear. The Underdoggs with Snoop Dogg is not a good movie. But there is something charming about him and really these two, he and Mike Epps, on screen together, and they're back and forth, and the care that he has for these kids. You know, the basic premise of the Underdoggs, you've got he's kind of like Antonio Brown, but it's years down the road after he Antonio Browned himself out of the league, and now he's trying to be better and change the way that people perceive him, and blah blah blah. It's a very standard, typical story, and you get Snoop Dogg's pretty fun. He's pretty entertaining, but he's not a likable guy. And, you know, as they're trying to turn him around, they do it so quick. And the way this team goes from bad to good, and this coaching style and how all that comes together, I mean, there's just a big montage, and it goes from this really bad dude who just did bad things and said really mean things. It's like, why are people wanting to root for him at all? And then 5 minutes later, he's turned his life around, and these kids like him. Look, the kids were likable. Some of the moments were likable. The game sequences were fun. It's not a good movie. The writing is horrid at times. But I would be lying if I didn't say I actually had a pretty good time with Snoop Dogg on screen, and Mike Epps, and some of the kids were entertaining. So it's not good, but I can't put it on the bad tier. I'm going to go meh for Underdoggs.
How was Nebraska?
It was, the usual.
Role Play on Amazon Prime. Kelly Kuko and David Oyelowo, Bill Nye as well. There's a lot of really good talent in here, and the idea on its surface is fantastic. You got this husband and wife, everything's peachy keen, and then all of a sudden you realize that she is an assassin for hire. Her family knows nothing about it. These twisted series of events kind of takes her out of the equation, and thus, you know, things start to come to light, and that changes the dynamic, the relationship between she and her family. Okay, I'm in. A little bit of Mr. and Mrs. Smith action, except it's really only Mrs. Smith this time around. We've had a couple of movies on Netflix like this as well. First 20 minutes, I'm like, man, this could turn out to be something really interesting. And then it becomes the most bland, boring, repetitive series of events I've seen in a long time, wasting the talents of Kelly. But really, David Oyelowo, he's a guy, and he shows a little bit of emotion, right? He starts to realize what his wife's going through. He's a guy you want a lot more out of with a character like this. And he gave an okay performance, but the writing for his character in here was so just... Come on. And the idea of this woman turned assassin, you'd think there'd be some more entertaining action scenes. You'd think there would be something in the first 55 minutes, hour and 10 minutes of the movie that was worth carrying through. But after the first scene or series of scenes, it's just so boring. And she's in the same place. He's in the same place being questioned by all of these people. And nothing happens for a while. Eventually, you get a resolve. I wasn't that interested in the resolve. I found Role Play to be just a bad movie, and that is shocking given the talent. I'm going bad tier. My good, look at January. We're not looking good here, folks. Can Badland Hunters turn this around? Well, let's talk about it. Here's the premise. Pretty interesting. After this deadly earthquake, it's turning Seoul into this lawless badland. There's a fearless huntsman who springs into action. He rescues a teenager abducted by a bunch of crazy... there's a lot of crazy people in this movie. A little bit of a Mad Max vibe. And you get some really cool action scenes and sequences from this. My issue with Badland Hunters on Netflix is that I never really found the plot to be all that interesting. So we get an awesome action scene with crazy action stars. It would look cool, be a little shaky and cut a lot at times, but it would look really cool. And then we would spend 20 minutes on characters and these emotional stories and these quirky things happening on screen that I just didn't really feel or I didn't care about as much. And then we go back to the action sequences and a couple of standouts, highlights of the year. And frankly, some action sequences in this movie that could stand up to a Mission Impossible or John Wick last year. But without the story, without the depth, without the development, and just my interest, thinking it would kind of be like Mad Max after the first 10 minutes and it turning out to not have any of that style, I just wasn't really all that enthused about this film. It's fine. It's a fun watch if you like putting action on in the background. But I have to go, yet again, the meh tier for Badland Hunters. Not bad. Just okay.
I'm Clarence.
Where I'm from, you fight to survive. I'm not a bad person, just playing the cards I was dealt.
All right, you've got a biblical type movie in the Book of Clarence. You have Clarence, our main character, and he's trying to figure things out for his family. He's seeing all these things happening with this Messiah. It's Jesus. And then he says, people believe in this guy. Let me take that idea and try to do the same thing, try to replicate that myself. And I found that to be, some people are going to see that as really blasphemous, and I was afraid they would toe that line and kind of fall into that territory. And there are one or two things that just don't quite work for me. It's like one scene, you have this really powerful and emotional moment involving Clarence and all the other great talent you have in this film. The other scene, you've got this montage of everybody getting high and this music playing that makes it try to feel more like a comedy. And I get it. It's going for that comedic vibe all throughout the film. But tonally, they are up and down all throughout this film that didn't give me the consistency I needed throughout the Book of Clarence. I actually thought they handled and treated these characters in a solid way. And Lakeith Stanfield is amazing. But it's the inconsistency in tone. And just, when I walked out of the movie, I'm kind of like, what was the point of that? And I hate saying that because it's such a lazy criticism, but that's how I felt with the Book of Clarence. So again, not a bad film. There are moments that did not work whatsoever, but there are other moments that elevate it to ultimately make it, and I know some people are going to disagree with me on this, a meh movie on the meh tier. This is starting to feel repetitive. Oh, it's the Beekeeper. Everybody is the Beekeeper. I can't nail it.
Everyone, need your attention, please. I'm gonna burn this place to the ground.
Jason Statham, we know what this is. This is ridiculous, it's silly, it's over the top, but it stayed that way. It kept that vibe throughout the movie, and ultimately, The Beekeeper kind of became a film I was having a bit of fun with. Is it ridiculous? Yes. But again, it provided me with madness from Jason Statham when it came to the action and this silly John Wick-ish-esque story of this guy who is a legend. You don't want to mess with the Beekeepers. They make that very obvious in the movie, but is he one that you can mess with and get away with it and kind of move on with your life? No. No, he's not, because they're not only messing with him in this film, they're messing with someone that he kind of looked after and took care of, and in very John Wick fashion, he goes after him. Jeremy Irons' character's like, yeah, you don't want to mess with this guy. Yeah, I know a lot of things about this guy. You don't want to mess with him. But Josh Hutcherson's like, you know what? I was in Five Nights at Freddy's. I can do anything. It's so silly. But again, if you like this kind of 90s throwback action movie, then you may get something out of The Beekeeper. Or at least it's a good one to throw on in the background and have some fun with. You end up in the White House. So how did we get there? It ends up in such an epic, crazy way. The main ending, like the final scene, is so kooky and wacky. But I had some fun with it. Way more fun than a lot of these other January movies. I'm going The Beekeeper on the OK too.
Are you the actor Andy Samberg?
I am.
I'm a big fan, man.
Oh, thank you very much. Hey, I got a question for you. You want to get in?
Self-Reliance, Jake Johnson. Got to this one a little later. This is actually directed by Jake Johnson as well. He's offered $1 million to play a game where someone's trying to kill him, but the catch is, as long as he has someone next to him, beside him, and doesn't really ever leave anyone's side, he's going to win the game in like 30 days. The problem that he keeps running into is that nobody believes he's telling the truth. They all believe he's crazy. This had so much potential to be a fantastic film. I love this idea, this game. I think Jake Johnson's entertaining. Anna Kendrick is in this movie. Got a bunch of little cameos of celebrities and sports peoples and, across the board. I really like what this film was going for. It didn't quite hit the mark of what I expected it to. Oh my God, this could be one of the best comedies of this year. It's not going to be one of the best comedies of this year, but I think I liked it more than other people. I don't know, man. You give me Andy Samberg, maybe that makes the film better. Regardless, this is an entertaining time. Not every joke was laugh out loud funny. I feel like the humor missed probably 35 to 40% of the time. That's still an okay ratio for a comedy. What really worked about this film is more of that heartfelt side of it, where our main character is already a guy who feels alone at the beginning of the film, and this is a way for him to find, I guess, companionship, even though no one in his family wants to believe him, but he encounters other people, some other hilarious characters along the way that really gets him through this. And while he slowly digresses and loses his mind throughout this film, there's also a light at the end of the tunnel that I saw as we were moving there, and the humor mixed with the heart, mixed with my adoration of Jake Johnson and the fact that he got to carry this role and his first time as a director. I liked this movie. I hesitate to do this, but I want to give this month some redemption. I'm going to go Self-Reliance on the good tier. Before I rank these films, if you haven't dropped that like, that would be awesome, and leave your lists down below on the awful tier. Yep, that sounds about right. Founders Day and then Night Swim in that order. Then Role Play. Everything's looking good so far, but we are going to switch Lift and Miller's Girl. I think I got a little more out of Miller's Girl on the meh tier. Here's where things get complicated. Let's go Justice League at the bottom. My disappointment was pretty big with that one. Followed by I.S.S. Needed more from that movie. Underdoggs, not a good film, but you get a little bit of fun out of it. And then Badland Hunters, some great action sequences, nothing more. The Book of Clarence did, it did a little better than the other movies on the meh tier. On the okay tier, we have The Kitchen Behind the Beekeeper. I've got to put The Beekeeper higher. There's something about that movie, man. And then Self-Reliance. If you were to ask me, which movie should I see from January, I would say Self-Reliance, maybe The Beekeeper, possibly The Kitchen. A movie I missed was Mean Girls, but I didn't get the chance to go see it. I'm sorry. Maybe I'll watch it when it comes to digital. All right, guys. Appreciate you so much for watching. Let me know if you like this new format. If you do, we'll do more of it. I'll see you soon.